So, for my geology scene investigation, I chose Highbanks Metro Park, and I'm doing an infographic through Prezi. So, before we talk about weathering, deposition, and erosion, I'm going to talk about Highbanks' most recognizable features. So, Highbanks itself is around 1,200 acres, which is the equivalent to 1,584 football fields. Right here, I have pictured a map of Highbanks Metro Park, where you can see the Olentangy River, the Shale Bluffs. Now on to some more recognizable features that can be found at Highbanks. You have the Delaware Limestone, which is the oldest accessible formation. It has many aquatic animal fossils, and it was actually formed through mechanical weathering. Another recognizable feature that can be found at Highbanks Metro Park is the Olentangy Shale that was formed through deposition. When I went there, I took some pictures, which you can see that are on the right. The Olentangy Shale is located above the Delaware Limestone, and there are 100-foot tall shale bluffs that can be found at Highbanks Metro Park. The Olentangy River is the next recognizable feature that can be found at Highbanks. You can see several pictures off here on the side. It is flat topography, and those 100-foot high shale banks are actually located right above the stream bank. The Olentangy River also has many deep ravines, which are recognizable, which I also have pictured later on. So, as for how weathering has affected Highbanks Metro Park, it has helped break down the shale rock and carve the deep ravines. Off to the side, I was able to take a picture of one of the ravines I found at Highbanks Metro Park. Chemical weathering has also helped form the Delaware limestone, as I stated earlier, and that's how weathering has had its effect on Highbanks. As for erosion's effect on Highbanks, more specifically water erosion, you can see it here with my picture in the river. It has helped shape some of the rivers, as well as there's erosion that's been caused by humans, which broke down the trail that the different trails that are found around through Highbanks. And of course, deposition's effect on Highbanks is that the bedrock of Highbanks was formed through deposited sediments. So you can find throughout all of Highbanks, it was formed through deposition. So now as for the future of Highbanks, my claim is that as water continues to erode and break down the rock or expand inside the cracks of the rock, the Olentangy River will grow wider and deeper. So, as for my first piece of evidence to support this, here's water's effect on rocks. So, over time, water will collect in the cracks of rocks, and when the water freezes, it expands. Eventually, the water will split apart, and this will widen the river, the sides of the river. But that's not my only piece of evidence. My next one is that there are other instances in which this has happened. For example, the Shale Hollow Stream has also been widened through water erosion and weathering, along with the Grand Canyon. For my final piece of evidence, erosion causes more sediments to build up in the river. When this happens, the water takes up more space to make room for the sediment, and that also causes the river to grow wider. And that is how those tie in with my claim. That is the end of my infographic on Highbanks Metro Park.